Diced Onion, a Warrior podcast. We're your hosts, Angelo Fiores and Mike Haggerty. Make sure you follow us on YouTube and subscribe to our channel. It's titled at Diced Onion. We are back after a 3-week hiatus to resume our look at the season 1 episodes, and we're up to episode 8, Mike, of season 1. This one's called They Don't Pay Us Enough to Think. That's a phrase I've uttered over my working career many times.
I was about to say, yeah, I've uttered that phrase, and that phrase has been uttered towards me. So yeah, I do get it. That's I love this. It's one of my favorite titles. This one.
Yeah, something we can all relate to, and we'll find out soon enough what the title has to do with the episode. This episode originally aired May 24th, 2019, already more than 4 years ago, Mike. It's hard to imagine that many people still haven't even caught on to this show yet, and the first season was 4 years ago.
Ah, those whimsical days of 2019, so long ago, so far removed.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, it does seem literally like a world away when you consider what transpired over the course of 2021 and 22. But let's get into the episode, shall we? Why not? It really picks up where episode 7 left off. If you remember, we had the Hopway on one side of the street, we had the Long Z on the other side of the street, and they were eyeing each other up and running into each other to have I guess, an epic street battle. But the screen went black at the end of the episode last week. So all we heard was the knives. We didn't get to see anything. Now it picks up where they leave off, charging each other. But now we get to see the brawl, don't we?
Yeah, and once again, props to this show for excellent fight choreography. It's really fun. I mean, look, we're both fans of all the old kung fu movies and new kung fu movies and karate jams and Jean-Claude Van Damme and Steven Seagal and all that, and obviously Bruce Lee. But to see this kind of choreography on this level, and got to give him credit because, usually a lot of times in the karate films, it's like one guy against 10 guys, but this was like 100 guys against 100 guys. So that had to be
right,
difficult to choreograph. So kudos to them. And just I put in my notes that everyone was sort of screaming and getting out that sort of testosterone and the primal urges. But notably, Lee Young didn't do that. Lee Young is a really cool cat. He was just sort of staying. He's the silent but deadly assassin.
Doesn't he always, though? I mean, that is the personality that he has shown from the get-go, and the writers have remained consistent to the character, where he is he's like the guy, you see him and you know he's going to strike, you don't know when, and he's going to pick his moment, and he's going to be super effective about it, and you're almost not going to even know what hit you. Like, that's the kind of guy that he is. So we've got this well choreographed brawl going on in the streets of Chinatown, and like you said, Mike, it's like 100 guys, and if you move your line of vision off of the main action and look in the background, there's so many cool things happening, whether someone's getting stabbed or like their neck is being broken or they're just taking like a punch or a kick to the head. It is a bloody and deadly battle.
You know what I'm thinking right now, because you and I, Angela and I, we always kind of talk about The Simpsons, and we can like work a Simpsons reference into anything. So I'm thinking, of course, about the episode where they had the Yakuza and The Simpsons, and Homer's looking outside, just looking at the one Yakuza guy. He's like, "But Marge, he's going to do something cool any minute." That's what I was thinking too. It's like that one guy, he's going to do something really cool.
As I was describing Lee Young to you, that exact Simpsons scene also went through my mind too.
I know it was.
The little guy is going to do something, and then they close the door, and all you hear is a and Homer's very disappointed that he missed it.
He's like, "Oh."
But back to this episode, though, we've got this massive brawl going on, and you see Young Jun have his successes, and he's cutting some guys up, and you see Assam kicking his way through the battle, and then of course you see Lee Young engaging, and the way the editing started to happen here, Mike, you got the sense that Lee Young and Assam were working their way towards each other when the scene goes black and we hit the credits.
Yeah, almost like that old West vibe where guys are working their way through a crowd and then they get to each other like a showdown on the street. And
that's right.
Yeah, that is something that I would be very curious to see Lee Young versus Assam, because as it stands right now in the show, they're probably the two best warriors on each side.
So the scene goes to black. We go to the credits and to the music, and then we're back into the episode, the first scene, post credits. and we see Penny in bed with kind of an unhappy look on her face. And I got to imagine, Mike, this is the morning after from the last episode when the mayor finally had his way with her payment to help her daddy, Mr. Mercer, get his contract.
Yeah. When she kind of gave herself a Mickey, she slipped her own Mickey
Right.
to deal with it.
She
And
gave herself the powder so she wouldn't remember either or
yeah,
get
not
through it,
exactly.
maybe.
I don't know if you can call that the walk of shame. That's the wake of shame, maybe.
Absolutely the wake of shame. And Penny knows exactly what she's done, and she doesn't feel good about herself. The scene cuts now to we're still in the mayor's house, though, and we see Mayor and Buckley discussing the Chinatown Squad and, of course, the massacre which just happened in the opening scene. And during this conversation, we hear the first utterings of the name of Senator Crestwood, who is not enamored with the Chinese.
Right. And if you know anything about history, you know that Senator Crestwood went on to become president. You know, I'm kidding. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. And this is a new, interesting character. And again, it sort of speaks to the nature of how politics relates to the street and sort of, I don't want to say maybe it is the incestuous nature of it, but yeah, the Chinatown's becoming a political problem now. It's a problem for everyone on every level.
Right.
And so now the senator's involved, and he's looking at this as a platform to advance his political career. But we see Buckley and we see Mayor Blake there, and once again, Buckley is there to push his case, and he's trying to get the mayor to move on this, but the mayor seems a little hesitant to deal with it, almost like he doesn't want to deal with it.
He doesn't want to take a stand against the Chinese problem, but Buckley makes it clear that 11 dead on the streets of Chinatown kind of requires him to act. And this is when the mayor says to Buckley, "Is there ever a bright side with you, Buckley?" And I gotta say, he's kind of a dumb mayor, isn't he?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously he's being manipulated by Penny. He's being manipulated by Buckley. So yeah, he's probably. I mean, we've compared him in past to Long Z and with Mai Ling, and with Buckley sort of being his version of Mai Ling as someone manipulating him. But with Long Z, he kind of knew the deal. I don't think that Buckley really knows the deal with. I'm sorry, Blake knows the deal with Buckley or with Penny. So
No.
yeah, he's kind of almost a figurehead, really.
He really is. He's been being manipulated on all sides, yet has the illusion of stature, and he lacks all of that. The scene now cuts back to the site of the big brawl, street gang war between Hop Way and Long Z, and Bill and the rest of the cops are on scene investigating the site. We see Lee, in fact, doing his typical poking around one of the carcasses when Bill walks up to him and says, "Did you crack the case yet?" Very tongue in cheeky. And Lee, you can see Lee look up and he kind of like has a half smile on his face before he goes into what he does discover, which is he has a tally: 7 dead on the Long Z side, 4 dead on the Hop Way side. And meanwhile, all the rest of the cops are talking about what a bunch of savages the Chinese are.
Right. And that's when Crestwood and Buckley shows up, and Crestwood, like any good politician, he's going to grandstand on this and use this as a platform to advance his own. I mean, he's going to frame it as he's here. He wants to help San Francisco end this scourge of crime, but it's really about
Bill has a
his own
great line.
needs.
Bill has a great line when they first show up. He says, "Oh, good, the politicians are here."
Yes.
So we see Buckley, we see Crestwood, and Bill is catching it a little bit from Crestwood while the senator is grandstanding. And we find out, of course, that he harbors presidential hopes. This is when Lee says to Bill something like, "I think that the other gang is involved because the Fung Hai are kind of in the area over there," and that's when Bill says to him, "They don't pay us enough to think."
Yes. And then we have the title of the episode,
Right.
which I love those little, let's call them Easter eggs, I guess. They just sort
Yeah.
of drop those in, and that was pretty cool. So now we understand what this episode is about. This
Yep.
episode is, or at least in part, it's about the political machinations of the time. And what's interesting is that politically speaking, it doesn't really change, right? I mean, I'm trying to like rack my brain right now, think of a good um, of a politician that's portrayed in a good light in a fictional TV show or a fictional movie. Usually, they're Some are, I guess, would be ideal. So a lot of times they're just
Maybe
sort of,
Bill Pullman as the president in
yeah, that okay, that's the exception. Bill Pullman, that's the one exception. Yeah,
it's
he
the
was
only
an
one I can think of.
idealist. Yeah, I mean, certainly like Mayor Quimby, but again, sorry, another.
Yes, he's a bad little boy. The politicians are never really portrayed in a favorable light. No doubt about that.
At best, cynically.
Yeah, exactly. The scene now moves along to Father June and Chow, and Chow basically relays the message that Mai Ling wants to negotiate. This is in the aftermath of them trying to assassinate Father June. And then, of course, now the big brawl on the street where the Longzi took the hit and lost more men than the Hop Way. Young June doesn't like the idea of negotiating, does he?
No, and this has sort of been the thread through this show is that it's the conflict between Father June and Young June, among other things, obviously, and their different styles of leadership. Father June being older, maybe a bit more temperate, and his idea is to always sort of go with patience. I mean, not that he's afraid to use violence, obviously, but being a little older, a little wiser, he's like he always goes with a more tempered, measured tone. He wants to attend the negotiation, and of course they're going to. But Young June doesn't. He's like, this gives her credibility, and he is right. But in this case, Father June is the more level head, and that's the way it's going to go.
Yeah, he preaches caution here. It doesn't mean he wants to talk to her willingly, but he wants to talk to her to get a sense of her. Like he said, I knew Long Z, but he couldn't see past Mai Ling's tits, as he said. And now it's time for me to try to see what she's all about. And Young June makes a great point. You know what she's all about. She wants power on the streets. But Father June, again, preaches caution, especially because of their alliance now, the Long Z's alliance with the Fung Hai. She's got extra muscle, and he knows that he shouldn't be poking the hornet's nest so outwardly. So we'll see
Right.
how that plays out. We're now at Chow's place of business, and Lee is there, Officer Lee, and he is asking questions. Chow asks questions too. He asks Officer Lee, "Why are you alone?" Rather than being with Bill, right?
This was, I gotta say, this was my favorite scene of this episode. Because first of all, I love Chow. I think Chow is probably my favorite secondary character on the show, let's say, because he's not physical. His character's not physical. He doesn't get into fights, but he is so just damn cool and smart and
Yeah,
such a player. So aside from the main characters, in fact, actually, I would even argue he's arguably might even be my favorite character on the show. And here we see he's talking with Lee on equal terms, which
right,
how often do we see that in this show with the Chinese and with the onions, right? You don't see that often.
right. With the
And
Ducks,
I'm sorry, with the Ducks. And here is Chow. He's just like, he's speaking to Lee on his own terms.
and he's
And
speaking his mind. He's not holding back, is he?
no, no. And actually, he utters a phrase in this, which I thought could have been the other title of this episode if they wanted to. You know what I'm going to say.
Too young, too white, too stupid.
I thought that if they went with any other title of the episode, this could have been that. Too young, too white, too stupid.
I
That
like.
would have been.
I like after Chow tells Lee why he can't understand Chinatown. And it's because of those three reasons: too young, too white, too stupid. Oh, sorry, my English not so good. Tries to pass off
Yeah,
the
yeah,
insult
yeah,
as if
yeah,
he didn't know what he was saying. And again,
yep.
that goes right back to how slick Chow as a character really is, right? But
I love Chow.
but what Chow explains to Lee here is that the law doesn't matter in Chinatown, only survival.
Yeah.
So maybe that will help Lee start to understand exactly what it is he's dealing with, because that's what Chow's trying to convey to him, that you're in over your head.
Yeah, and he doesn't understand, and he can't understand. And I think he even didn't he imply that if he did try to understand, it would lead to the end of his life.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
And that's
like
when he asks Lee to leave because having cops around his store is bad for business. And Lee says to him, I don't know why I thought
yeah,
I would. I don't know why I thought
yeah.
you would help me. And Chow's answer is great.
This is my other favorite line of the episode. He goes, "Officer, I just did."
I just did help you. And that's where the scene ends. And again, what a great scene between two of the more thoughtful characters on the show.
Yeah, I'm going to go on record. Chow's my favorite character.
Yeah, I'm still going to stick with Li Yang because he brings the thinking and the brutality, but Chow's right up there for me too. We're back to the police station. Bill is sitting in front of his boss, the chief, and he wants out of Chinatown. And what does the chief say to him when he says, I want out? He says, are you hitting the tables again, Bill? So everybody knows Bill, and everybody knows Bill's personal demons, don't they?
Yeah, there's no secrets here in Warrior. Well,
There's
very
really
few
not.
secrets, rather. Very few secrets. And it obviously sort of, did you get the impression that he was implying that he's using that as leverage almost?
Who the chief using it as leverage?
Yeah, using it
Yeah,
against Bill.
yeah, absolutely, he is, and also then he tries to legitimize it by saying, if the problem with Chinatown is that everybody's still killing each other, and my man in charge isn't doing the job. So what am I going to reward you for failure?
That's a good point.
Yeah. So he, of course, it's his punishment for hitting the tables. I think so. Anyway, there's definitely part of that there. Otherwise, why bring it up in the conversation, right?
Right.
But then he sort of throws Bill a backhanded glimmer of hope when he says, "Well, don't worry. Maybe the Exclusion Act could happen, and all the Chinese will just get loaded up on the boats and sent back to Chinatown." And that's when Bill, defeated, just kind of gets up and walks out of the office.
And Bill doesn't seem to have faith in that option.
He knows he's
So
beaten right
yeah,
there.
he knows he's beating. So I wonder if historically if that's I wonder if people, I guess no one can really answer if people really did believe that the Exclusion Act was going to work.
You know,
Because
that's that's a really good question. It seems to get thrown around an awful lot as if it's a foregone conclusion, right? But it doesn't seem like anything on the lawmaking side of this show um, proves any of that is happening. I don't think so. We're now off to the looks like the Irish bread line. Got all the unemployed guys. We see Leary, Dylan Leary, who we haven't seen in a couple episodes now. He's walking around, glad handing, chatting with everybody. You see him help a guy, throws him a couple bucks, gives another guy a hat, and tells him where to go to get some food or a place to stay or something like that. Um, and that's when a cartload of Chinese workers comes through the streets.
right, and this reminded me of the scene with Crestwood a few minutes ago because now we see Leary, the politician, glad handing and meeting his constituents and um, offering money. He's offering money, and that one gentleman he's speaking to, and he says, "Go here, give him my name. He'll give you hot food and then give you a bed for the night." I mean, he's sort of being patriarchal and his own form of grandstanding, which I thought was interesting because Leary's kind of a politician too, really, if you think
Oh,
about it.
oh yeah, he's definitely a politician because he represents a mass of people, and that's really what a politician's job is to represent a mass of people. And a smaller group of people, the Chinese workers, comes through, and they don't have an easy time of getting down the street, do they? Because those Irish unemployed guys start hurling rocks and stones and epithets and anything else that they can get their hands on as the Chinese workers make their way through to go build the railroad or whatever it is work that they're taking away from the Irishman. And Leary doesn't like it, does he?
No, in fact, he says this won't do. This won't fucking do.
This won't fucking do. I wrote that down too. We're back to the mayor who is with his father-in-law, Mr. Mercer, and the mayor's all smiles now. Congratulations, father-in-law. Your bid to lay the track for the steel for the cable car has been approved. No more delays. No more delays. Everything is great. I guess because he got laid, huh?
Penny's efforts were not for naught.
Yeah.
It worked.
He thanks his son-in-law for the approved bid to move forward with the work, and the mayor says, "Please, we're all family." And that's when, like, for a split second, you see the understanding notion fly across her father's face, where he's like, "Oh," and he like does like a nod, where he gets what's going on here. But then it's right back to business, where the mayor says, "Now I expect that you are going to promptly deliver everything that you promised, right? Because
Right.
I vouched for you."
Right. And actually, there's a good line in this scene. This is another one of my favorite lines. I don't know if you know what I'm going to say here, but when they're talking about the money, because he says to Penny's father that he's going to have to lay out some money. And he gets a little vexed at that. And then Mayor Blake says politics is like poker. The pot may change hands, but it never really leaves the table. And I thought that was another great line for this episode.
That,
Another very cynical line.
that is a great line. And you felt like after he gave him the contract and told him the money was coming his way and told him that he vouched for him and that he expected delivery, this is when he like slides in the ulterior motive, which is he tells him that the senator is coming to San Francisco and that he's inviting him to a dinner to join other generous donors. And that's when Mercer's line was, "Oh, spending the money you're paying me before I even get it," he says. Right. And that's when the poker line comes in, and two brilliant lines back to back there. But now you get the sense of what the mayor's motivation is here. Now he's curried the favors of his father-in-law by giving him a job to do, and now it's going to be, you're going to reward me by donating to the senator, who's going to help us all stay in business and in our positions. It's a web, isn't it?
It is an entanglement. It is a web of. You're right. It's a web of politics. I won't say web of lies, because I think everyone's sort of being honest, but brutally honest. So yeah, it is a web of interconnected. It's how everything is connected, really.
Yeah. We're now off to Atoy's place. Scene shifts again, and she's working the room. More glad handing. She's making her way around, saying hello to the patrons. And as she's walking around, she sees her business partner, Patterson, the guy that's been buying properties with her. And it looks like they've got a problem, Mike.
Yeah, the people that they're buying from don't want to do business with someone who's in her line of work.
More importantly, they don't want to do business with someone who's fronting for a Chinese whore. So they found out somehow that he was fronting. And I want to know, Mike, before we take you this further, all right? So they're trying to buy property from somebody. That somebody rejects their offer on the grounds that he is fronting for a Chinese person, right? And madam, in this case, Atoy. How did they find this out? I want to know. Did Patterson give them that information? Was he being a less than honest business partner, or did something else happen to tip them off? We don't know this. I'm just rhetorically asking the question. But the problem now is that they want to extort Patterson and Atoy for more money.
Right. And Atoy, at least initially, seems amenable about that. But she's got two things going on here. She wants to buy a plot of land in, it was Spring Valley, I think it's called. Spring Valley. And that seems to be very important to her. So she's like, okay, give them the money, but close the deal on Spring Valley. Like, that is her priority.
Right. She says, close the deal, then we'll pay them. And just to backtrack, why would they pay them the extra money? Because they threatened to expose their business dealings, which could ruin Patterson and get him in jail. And then, of course, get Atoy deported. So they've both got a lot to lose here. And this is where Atoy says to him, we buy silence, then make plan. Close the deal, then we'll pay. So she's already, wheels are turning, Mike.
Yeah, and that's why she's one of the smartest characters in the show.
Yeah.
And she's thinking a couple of steps ahead. Whereas you and I are trying to figure out, okay, who tipped him off? But she's already playing, what's it called, multi-dimensional chess.
Yeah, that doesn't even matter to her. Like, she's already on to the, all right, how are we handling this? I'm sitting here with you trying to figure out, how did this happen? Like, she doesn't even care. Like, she's already, moving ahead. And that's a good point. I didn't think of it that way. It's now time for the big meeting between the Hop Way and the Long Z. And we see Mai Ling. We see Father June. We see Chow is there. There's a bunch of other people, too, including the guy who brokered the meeting. I forget what his name was.
Lao Ting.
Thank you. Lao Ting is there as well. And Father June and Mai Ling exchange words here. There's not a lot of respect in the room.
No, Father June is barely concealing some anger. He resents her. You see, he's not really that different from young June. He's just more measured in how he handles things. And again, he's a little nod to, I guess, his own version of politics. So basically we see that, what they want, what it's all about. And Long Z, they want to be able to sell their molasses, and they want to carve out their own little territory. And the Hop We do not care for that. So they come to terms.
Because it goes against the treaty that they have.
It goes against the treaty. So they come to a an agreement there. It's going to be their two best warriors instead of having blood, because they've seen that what happens when there's blood in the streets. It doesn't work for anyone.
Well, they didn't come to that agreement all that quickly. The broker of the meeting offered it, said to prevent more bloodshed and to end the Tang War. Let's do it this way. You put up your best guy, they'll put up their best guy. Do you guys agree with that? And he gives them even the terms. He says if the Hop Wei wins, 5 more years of the treaty, and if the Long Z wins, they get to carve out some territory and negotiate the ability to trade more molasses, right? And Young June doesn't want any part of it. He says we could have diced these guys and been done with it. Whereas Father June wants to consider his options. And we see both sides now considering their options and talking it over. You've got Mai Ling on one side talking about it with man,
Young.
thank you, Li Yang, all these names going by. I mean, then you got Young June and Father June talking about it on their side. But ultimately, they both come to the same conclusion.
Yeah, that this is the way it's got to be. And there's also a good little interesting scene there between Li Yang and Young June, where Young June was, like, let's do this, and and Li Yang says, "Why don't you do it now?" Or
Why don't you
something to that
dice me
effect.
right now? He said.
Yeah, why don't you dice me? And I would have liked to have seen that, because I got to admit, I am really anxious to see Li Yang in combat, because it's clear we at this point I'm assuming it's going to be Li Yang who's going to be representing the Long Z. I mean, who's better than
Absolutely.
him? Who's better than him?
So far,
And
we've seen, yeah, nobody's better than him so far. Maybe nobody in the whole show, for all we know. Debatable. We're now back to Penny's studio. Assam is there, looking over her work, holding one of her pictures. It looks like a drawing of him, actually. And in walks Penny. She doesn't look too happy, does she?
No, and she's finally realizing that she's dating a gangster, and she's not comfortable with that. And at first, he kind of sorry.
No, go ahead.
And at first, he thinks, because she's like, because you're, and he goes, what, John Chinaman?
Right.
And then
She
she goes,
says a
no,
criminal.
you're a criminal. So
Let's
he was kind of
backtrack
going
for
with,
a second, though.
okay,
When she walked in, the first thing she said to him when she walked into the studio there and he was waiting for her, the first thing she said to him was, "Where were you the other night?" And I was like, oh my God, she's like a total girlfriend already, like all over this guy. And I was thinking to myself, run now, Assam, run now. He explains to her that he had no choice to not show up that night. He must have left her hanging, I guess, the night of the big brawl, I assume. And like you said, she realizes for her own good that this relationship can't continue for a number of reasons, which she outlines. She's the mayor's wife. He's a criminal. She's also, listen, it's clear she cares about him and doesn't want him to be one of the dead, even though she feels like that's an inevitability.
So do you think that she's doing this sort of protect herself? Like, she doesn't want to be in a position where she actually falls in love with him and then he ends up dead,
Yeah,
assuming she
absolutely.
hasn't already?
Yeah, that's a big part of it. She's already fallen in love with him. There's no question about that. But she also knows that she can't hang around in this situation because it's going to be bad for her all around. It's already bad for him. Like his fate is kind of whether he's involved with her or not, he is going to be having the outcome he's going to have. Whereas she can avoid some of that by extricating herself from the situation. And that's when she tells him that he should leave.
Yep.
And,
And
and she tells him not to come back.
yeah, just to really sort of hammer it home, like, get out, don't come back.
Yeah. And Assam leaves, but he, not before he gets an earful from her and she gives him a lot of things to contemplate, right?
Yeah, basically saying that the path that he's on is not good. And we know that, we've seen that before.
He knows it too.
And he knows it too. And the ironic part is, I don't know if she probably knows that he didn't exactly choose this. He didn't come here and say, hey, I want to be a gangster. He came here looking for a sister, and he just kind of, when you really think about it, I mean, the way this all happened for Assam is kind of, he comes here looking for a sister, but next thing you know, he's involved in a full-blown gang war that he never wanted any part of.
Right.
Because he's not really Hop Wee in his own nature, in his own persona. That's not what he's about. He wants his sister, and maybe he wants to go back to China. I mean, at this point, it's unclear, but he just wants to be with his sister, protect his sister.
It's wild how his fate has led him to this point. And now we are back in Chinatown and we see Lee and Bill walking the beat. There's a lot of activity around. In fact, I noticed someone putting up like a little billboard or an ad um, for the big duel, which is going to come between the two best fighters of each time. Go back and look at that. When that scene cuts from Penny's place to the
I did see
streets,
that.
someone
Yeah.
puts up like a little poster note advertising the big duel. And now here's where Lee and Bill are walking the street, and Bill's still having visions of Damon's bloody face, isn't he? He's still haunted.
By the way, I meant to tell you that I saw the actor play Damon in a recent commercial. I forget. He's wearing a football jersey. It's something related to football. I don't know if it's
Gambling.
Yeah, I think it's a gambling ad. Yeah, and I remember I said, my wife doesn't watch the show. I'm like, hey, that's Damon right there. And she's like, what? But yeah, so anyway, that aside, I actually did recently see him in something. So
That's interesting. So Bill
yeah,
keeps
so
seeing him too, but still in his bloodied state that we last saw Damon in. Bill clearly still bothered by what's weighing on his head.
and that speaks to Bill's morality that he didn't enjoy doing what he did. He didn't enjoy killing Damon. He just felt he had no other choice.
Right.
And so they're kind of setting up Bill as still sort of a redeemable character. I mean, I'm trying to think now, is there any character in here that's truly evil? And I'm trying to think. I really, maybe Buckley. I think
He
Buckley
hasn't
probably
shown
might be.
any he hasn't shown any glimmers of humanity about him. Even Mai Ling has shown some compassion along the way.
Yeah, she cares about her brother. Every one of them have sort of an anchor. Young June has reverence for his father. Maybe Father June. He's kind of. I mean, he's not a kind man, but I don't know. It's hard to say.
Yeah. Good good question to contemplate for sure. After Bill sees Damon's bloody face, a couple of Fung Hai soldiers are on the streets and they spot Bill. And one of them comes up to Bill and does this money. Oh, that's the money. It means the money when he does that thing with the fingers, right? And he owes them money still from back when Damon fronted him. And they know that. But Bill immediately reacts because he's trying to keep his secret, immediately reacts and goes off on the guy, doesn't he? On the Fung Hai soldier.
Yeah, and he's kind of oddly, weirdly kind of admonishing him too at the same time, like you don't do this here, like not like he broke etiquette, like it was a breach of etiquette more than anything else.
Right. You don't step up to a cop, he says.
Right.
And he
It
kind of
was
whacks him with the baton, and that's when Lee comes in and breaks it up.
yeah, and Lee. It was at this point that Lee and Bill kind of have it. Lee and Bill have had many moments. I think there's almost I want to say like a marital quality to their relationship, and that they're kind of partners and that they're kind of bickering. There's sort of that aspect of it to me, and because Lee is aware of Bill's habits, like everyone. Apparently, everyone knows about Bill's habits.
Yeah, no secret there.
And he calls him on. He says, "How much?" Or
How much do you owe? He says.
yeah, he calls him on it. So the worst kept secret in Warrior is Bill's habitual gambling.
I love Bill's answer to how much do you owe, and he looks at Lee and he says, "I told you, they don't pay us enough." He didn't even say to think anymore. He cut it off at they don't pay us enough. So really, we've reached a point here where Bill is justifying why he gambles, why he takes money on the side, and all of that. It comes down to the fact that he just ain't getting his back scratched enough by his paycheck every week, right? All right. We move along now and we see Patterson again, Atoy's partner, and he is in an office with a couple of other well-to-do, well-dressed guys, and it looks like the Spring Valley deal is closed, and now he's there to pay off the $5,000 extortion envelope.
Yep, the blackmail.
The blackmail part of the program.
The blackmail, and he just wants to get out of there, and those other guys are letting him know that they have leverage on him.
Yeah.
But then we see the meeting. It didn't go the way I thought it was going to go.
Yeah, I was a little surprised by what the other two guys had in mind. Timmons and the other guy's name is escaping me right now, but they make it clear to Patterson that they're not willing to let their extortion stop here. And they pull a total like Tony Soprano gangster move where they say to him, "We've decided to become your partner." And he says, "Well, I have to talk to my partner. They're not going to like it." And he responds with, I'm talking to you. I'm not talking to the Chinese whore. So again, these guys like what they see money wise coming out of Patterson and his dealings with Atoy, but they don't want, they still don't like the Chinese, right? So that's when Atoy shows up. This is a surprise.
I was about to say, well, it turns out he is going to talk to that Chinese whore.
Yeah.
And he's not going to like what she has to say.
He says something. I think he says to her, "Who are you?" And she says, "Chinese whore," right?
Yeah.
But then,
I was a little, what surprised me about this is that I would think that this would raise some issues for her. This is going to cause some problems. It almost, I mean, I would imagine in the real world, a person in her position would probably just have to keep paying that out.
right.
But this being Warrior, it doesn't work that way. So I don't know if this was necessarily a good move. It was exciting to watch. It was fun to watch. But as far as a long-term strategy, we'll see how this goes. But now she's got two dead guys, two dead powerful guys.
Yeah, we didn't even really talk about that. Atoy showed up and she finishes them very quickly, I might add, her way with the sword. And they stand absolutely no resistance to her. The one guy, in fact, comes into the room with his throat already slit. And the second guy, Timmons, tries to put up a defense, then quickly tries to backtrack his strong arming, and Atoy's having none of it. She just finishes him. And her partner, Patterson, is essentially shitting his pants now, right? He says, "Oh my God, I can't believe, what did you do? Why did you do this?" And Atoy is clear about why she did this.
She did it to protect her business. She did it to protect her partner.
And then she tells him to go home.
Yeah.
Boy, she's badass again, but you can tell at the end of this scene, Mike, that she's a little worried too. You can see the worry on her face.
Yeah, she's no fool, and she's got to realize that this is going to cause some problems. Like I said, her partner clearly knows that this is going to be an issue, no matter how you, no pun intended, slice it. So yeah, I don't know how this at this point. I don't know how this helps her. I think this might have been a bad move on her part.
Seeing how weak Patterson is, it makes me wonder if he, in fact, did spill the beans to those guys that he was fronting for a Chinese person. I really wonder because he doesn't have a whole lot of resolve the way that he shirks from anything having to do with dirty work. You know what I mean? So I'm curious about what his ultimate motivations are. We're now back to Assam. I guess he's walking back from Penny's place and he's now confronted by 5 dudes in masks.
Yeah, and as it turns out, we get another little scrap here.
This is new. Assam says,
Yeah.
masks.
Yeah. Always a good line from Assam.
Yeah.
And notice by the way, this episode has really not been Assam heavy so far, and that
no, not at all. It took a while before we even saw him.
Right. Because I just realized we haven't really talked about him a lot. The guy who's the star of the show.
Yeah, and the main character.
And that's what's so cool about the show because there's so many layers and so many different actors and so many different stories going on. So we're going in different directions. So now we see Assam, and of course he has a good line as always.
Yeah, and of course he has a good brawl with these guys, and he cleans them up. They're not much resistance either, are they? He has his way with them, kicks, punches, knees, whatever else he has to do. And next thing you know, there's 5 guys in masks on the ground, knocked out cold. And then that's when Father June and Young June show up.
Yeah, it was just a test. It was a trial to see if he really could be their next warrior because they've lost Bolo, which is interesting because they don't know that they lost Bolo indirectly because of Assam,
right?
So, well, I mean, Mai Ling was the one that did finish him off, but yeah, Assam was the one that set him up. So yeah, and so he's now their chosen one. He's the chosen one.
Father June says, Young June told me that you could scrap like the best of them, but I had to see it for myself. And now I have, and I nominate you to be our warrior. To avenge Bolo, interestingly, he says too, which I was like, wow, that's very ironic. And when Father June looks at Assam in the eye and he says, "Will you do this for your brothers?" Assam responds, And he says, I will. But boy, if that wasn't the most half-hearted, unconvincing agreement to a question that I've ever seen in my life. Here's Assam once again painted into a corner, another position where he doesn't have a choice, Mike.
Well, what can he say in that position? He's got no choice.
He's got to, but it's one of those things where he did get himself into this.
He did. He did. And now we're set up for the main event. It's going to be Assam versus Lee Young, which as a viewer, I'm really excited to see that.
Yeah.
That's going to be fun. I'm almost like preparing to watch MMA at this point.
Just to warm up for this battle, right?
Yeah. But yeah, you can see where Assam is he's painted himself into a corner
Yeah.
because of the choices that he's made. Now he was almost too good for his own good, and that's part of what the problem was.
Right. That's a good point. Now we're at back at our toys place. Young June's kind of talking off the cuff with whoever's around, including Assam, and he doesn't necessarily like the idea of them acquiescing to having this one-on-one battle. Not that he doesn't have faith in Assam, but he just doesn't think that Father June is thinking this thing out. And again, it goes back to, this slowly creeping in, this questioning of Father June's motivations and tactics by young June. Meanwhile, while this conversation's going on, we see from across the room there's one of the patrons of Atoy's establishment. He's got a girl on his lap and he's being really disrespectful. He's speaking disrespectfully about the girl. He's being racist. He's just not being a nice guy. And Assam doesn't like it, does he?
Yeah, and I was a little confused by this scene because I didn't know where. I mean, I know where it was coming from, but I don't at the same time. I know where it was coming from because, obviously he's a defender of the Chinese and he respects his own people, but it just seemed a little bit out of context to me because okay, here's a guy getting ready for the fight of his life. This is going to be the fight of his life. He's taking on a fellow Asian, and here's this racist white guy doing this. It just sort of seemed to be. I wasn't sure. I just don't know what they were going for here. I
I'll
don't
tell you
know.
how I saw it. How I saw it is Assam is there. Young June's talking about this fight that's got to come. Assam does not want to do this. He's pissed at himself. He's pissed that he's in this situation and his head ain't where it's supposed to be. So that guy berating the prostitute and being disrespectful for her, that was just an excuse for him to get up and take his pissed off self over there and slap somebody around just because he's annoyed mostly at himself at this point. That guy didn't mean anything to him. And that guy, and him standing up for that prostitute, that happens 100 times a night in Atoy's place. So the motivation of standing up for the prostitute was kind of like a thin excuse to get up and just slap somebody around. At least that's the way that I saw it. Because when Atoy steps in, she stops him right away and says, "Hey, what are you doing? You're out of line." Assam stops, grabs the guy's bottle of booze, and then takes off. So for me, yeah, he gives him the wink of the eye and he leaves. So for me, I felt like it was just Assam venting in a sense his own anger for the position that he's putting himself in, which is he's now got to fight Li Yang in a battle to the death for a hop wei tong that he doesn't even really care about.
Yeah, and that is really ironic.
Yeah, truly, as this series winds down to the end of the season, all of these things are starting to bubble to the surface, Mike. And even the things that are kind of secret are no longer going to be secret the way it's going.
No, I can't wait. But I'm sorry.
No, that's right. I was just going to move along to the next scene at the mayor's house where it's now the gathering of the well-to-dos, right?
Yeah.
Senator Crestwood is there, as well as the mayor, of course. And the senator continues on with his anti-Chinese sentiment. He's calling them savages. And while all this is going on, we see Mr. Mercer, Penny's dad, and then Penny sees him there as well. They acknowledge each other's presence. And this is interesting because while the senator is talking about eradicating the Chinese problem, some of the rich guys are sort of objecting to losing cheap labor. And then a bickering of the rich guys starts happening here. They're like, sort of poking at each other with verbal barbs.
Right, and that was pretty interesting to see too, because obviously, I mean that is a good example of how this show is not really this show or this topic is not really that simple. Because right, we're actually dealing with this topic right now, as far as, and I'm not going to get into the whole thing. Just that's the age old debate about immigrant labor is that some people don't like them, but the people who are pulling the strings like them because they cost less money, but that causes resentment. We see that in this show between the Irish and the Chinese. And I mean, this exact same thing is going on right now. But we got to see our little social justice warrior Penny intervene and speak up for the Chinese and
against the senator.
against the senator. Which you go, girl. I admire your gumption. By
Yeah.
God, you gotta.
The mayor, however, does not admire her gumption whatsoever. And,
No, he's
he
embarrassed. He
asks
just
her to kind of, hey, sweetheart, if you don't mind, and he's trying to keep that cheery face, but you could see he's unhappy with her, isn't he? And she goes on about stolen land and white people taking advantage of races that they deemed inferior. And this is a very, very funny line where the mayor says something like, my wife never misses out an opportunity for a spirited debate, right?
right. And then Senator Crestwood has a good line where he goes, well, Mayor, it looks like you just lost the vote if she could vote.
Yeah, you lost her vote, Senator, if she had a vote, he said. And that was kind of the end of, go away, little girl. You've made your noise
Yeah,
now, and you're not a factor here. And of course, the scene ends with the mayor and his wife, looking at each other. He's smiling angrily, if that's a thing.
yes, that is a joyless smile. That is a smile of pure malice.
Malice and anger, and we'll see where this all takes them. Back to Atoys. She confronts Assam, and she pretty much tells him what's what, right? The things that we've all been saying at this point. He is the victim of his own choices. He is reckless, and Lee Young, who is about to pummel him, is definitely not wasting his time beating up drunken white guys in a brothel. And if
Or
that's not a
yeah,
reality check, I don't know what is.
or drinking heavily as apparently Assam is doing.
Right, right, right. Because he was drunk too, and she's one of the few characters. Well, actually, many characters will speak truthfully to Assam, but she's one of the few he'll actually listen to.
Yeah, she's almost like the Adrian to his Rocky in this scene just before the big fight. She's like,
I can't win.
yeah, she's like, you can't win. Exactly. She's Adrian.
That is so funny. The scene cuts now to Lee Young. He is training in the Long Z headquarters there. He's easily beating up three guys. I mean, it's not even a contest. He's not breaking a sweat. The other guys are definitely inferior to Lee Young, and I wonder if they're filming the scene in such a way to establish that Lee Young is just that superior to everybody else, or does the scene establish just how weak the rest of the Long Z warriors are, and that there was no choice but to make Lee Young the guy for the duel? I'm not sure what the directors are going for there.
Well, that's an interesting point because we don't really know a lot. We know more about Hop Wei than we do about Lee Young at this
True.
point. I mean, the whole gang at this point,
Yeah.
and for that matter, Fung Hai. So they haven't really established any really other characters aside from Lee Young. And I get it; you can only have so many characters, but yeah, either way, Lee Young clearly is the guy, and we're seeing him train, and then after he beats up those guys, he kind of gives a little, nodding
Elders
about to
approve.
the elders approved of his fighting skills.
Yeah, so I don't know if that was like his final audition to seal his position as the guy in the brawl, but it kind of gave you that sense where he was getting the rubber stamp there. We're back to Bill's house. Bill O'Hara, the sergeant. He's sitting on the porch. He is smoking a cigarette, and here comes his wife to tell him dinner's ready. And you could tell he's kind of keeping watch the same way Lee was a couple of episodes back when Bill was worried about Damon and crew. Now, with the Fung Hai getting in his face earlier in the episode, you got to figure he's worried about them coming back.
Yeah, he's sitting on the porch. He's contemplating once again, contemplating, we speak of life choices. And his wife comes out, and again, she kind of knows the deal. And she just says, tell me how bad, or something to that effect. She's like, how bad is it? and he said it's pretty bad.
Yeah.
He's got the Fung Hai after him, who are at this point, I guess you could say they're debatably a little bit scarier than Long Z.
Yeah.
Um, I guess you could say that. So yeah, probably not the best of choices to have them after you. And he's just like he's kind of reassuring, like, don't worry, it'll be okay. I'll work it out. But he doesn't. You don't really get the sense that he has a real plan. He's just more or less just trying to placate her.
Yeah, and you're getting the sense now for the first time that she's not really being placated, because she says to him, when I met you, I felt like one of the things about you was that you would keep me safe. And you can get the sense she's no longer feeling safe. She also says to him, tell me that you're going to fix this. And he says, I will. But then she says something like, I love you, you big idiot. And he says, it's your funeral. And her response was telling. Tell me about it, she says. So Bill's wife is not stupid. She may be the Irish immigrant, less than educated housewife, but she's nobody's dummy. She knows her husband better than he knows himself, and she could see it on his face.
Yeah, and I think Bill better get out of gambling, because everyone knows he better give that up as his addiction.
As a hobby. Yeah, find something else. Can I introduce you to opium? I mean, honestly, really. At some point, you got to realize you're the loser's loser and just cut gambling crap, Bill.
What's that saying? If you're at a poker table and you don't know who the sucker is, it's probably you. Oh,
we now move along, and it's Assam. He's walking along, and out of nowhere, out of the darkness, comes Mai Ling. She finds him. She always finds a way to find him, doesn't she? And she comes out of concern to tell him that he cannot fight Li Yang. He will kill him. So now here's the second person coming to Assam, warning him that he can't go through with this. And she begs him to back out.
But he's not going to do that.
No, because he's filled with this pride, right? This bravado on top of everything else, which she points out. But he's such a dummy. We've pointed out as well that Assam's not that bright, even though he's witty. He thinks that she wants him to back out because he's going to win and she's going to lose her power. So he's not going anywhere. She says, you can't beat him. He says, we'll find out.
Here's my question, though. At this point, what is he fighting for?
I think he's just fighting to cover, to keep his cover and to keep her cover at this point, because he could walk, he could take off, he could have said no, but all of that would have meant death. He would have been dead if he'd have said, no, I don't want to take on this honor, Father June.
But I mean, obviously, his sister is offered to get him out of there before. So, I mean, obviously, for the sake of the show, he's not going to do that. But in real life, I would think that, I mean, what the hell is he fighting for anymore? So take this opportunity. Your sister obviously doesn't want your help at this point. She's a boss, so she doesn't really need your help. So why, I mean, this is my rhetorical question now. Why? I guess you're right. Maybe he's just fighting for some sort of pride. And he's obviously being overconfident in himself.
The answer is
a mistake.
Yeah, the answer is not exactly. The answer is not rhetorical, though, Mike, because she said it to him. Once again, you got to show everybody that you're the bigger man and you're the better man and you're the tougher guy. So this is a pattern of behavior that Assam has displayed all throughout his life, even before we met him, going back to their time in China. And again, more directly referencing to the whole reason why him and Mai Ling got into this mess to begin with, because again, of that pride that gets him in trouble. The scene ends very in a way that, she says to him, goodbye, Assam. And that goodbye is a very firm goodbye. She already said to him that Li Yang's going to kill you. That goodbye felt like a final goodbye, not just a see you later.
Yeah, that's not like I'll catch you next week at the store. No, this is
that was adios.
Yeah.
We move on to the next scene, Mike, and we're back to the unemployed Irish waiting for their opportunity to work. And here comes a carriage car being pulled by horses. And who's in it? Penny's dad, Mr. Mercer, out to meet Leary. Remember, a couple episodes back, they had their little conversation in the restaurant where Leary was assured by Mr. Mercer that he would be hiring Irish Irish labor. And here he is to make good on that agreement. And Leary announces that to all the guys in the crowd, doesn't he?
And by doing that, he's sort of giving Mercer an endorsement. He's endorsing him, really,
Fully.
fully endorsing him. So this is a good move on. I mean, probably a good move on Mercer's part. You know, he's endearing himself to the workers because Leary's a guy they trust. The Irish, they trust him. So again, a little bit more politics here.
Definitely, because Leary uses the type of language that a politician would use. Things like, we're going to take back our jobs and take back our city, right? And the men get behind that kind of rhetoric and they cheer, and everyone's more glad handing. Here's Mercer shaking hands and everybody's smiling, and all is well. Meanwhile, we got Buckley watching from a distance, taking note of everything that's going on, and you wonder what's going on behind those glasses and behind those beady little eyes, Mike.
um, yeah, Buckley always got a card to play, and this is one of my favorite things about Buckley because you don't even really know what's going on, but it's fun to sort of speculate. I mean, you do kind of know what's going on, but it's fun to see those wheels just turning, and you can see the wheels turning in there, and like, okay, what's this shifty bastard up to?
He's one of the few players in this show that are playing chess as well. Seeing a couple moves ahead. Atoy's doing it. Buckley does it. Chow does it as well. Not too many others. A lot of the other characters are more in the moment, right? And they're playing checkers. We now see Father June, and he's playing a flute, maybe a panpipe. I'm not sure. I wanted to look up what that instrument was, but either way, he's very good at it. And incidentally, the actor who plays Father June is he actually plays that instrument, and he does post about it on Instagram. He restores them, he builds them. He's way into it, and I'm doing the guy a disservice by not knowing what the instrument is called. So I apologize for not fully doing my homework. But while the music is playing, it's sort of like a montage that we're familiar with. You see Assam training, and he's hitting that tree. You see the girl who was rescued by Lee Young. Now she's cleaning up around the not Lee Young, Atoy. She's cleaning up around Atoy's bedroom, and she finds something while she's cleaning. It's a big scene right here.
Yeah, she finds a sword.
Yeah, during this montage, she finds that sword, the sword that Atoy does her damage with, one she used earlier in the episode. And you wonder what's going to happen here as the montage continues. And we see Penny painting, and we see Lee Yang training. So all these scenes while the flute music is playing, and then we cut back to Atoy's, and this is, I thought, the coolest part of the scene.
Yeah,
that's where we see Lai, the girl Lai with the sword, and she is waving it around like a skilled swords person, isn't she? And Atoy can see her from a distance, doing the moves, whatever it is that she was doing there, swinging the sword. And she was pretty good with it. And you wonder what's going through Atoy's mind now as she watches Lai wave that sword around like an expert.
And suddenly she goes from the timid little girl that she's protecting to someone who's a potential bodyguard or maybe a warrior in her own right.
Yeah, clearly she's got some skills which she must have acquired in China, right? But there was never an indication at this point that this girl had any ability beyond cleaning. So this is a new twist.
Yep, another layer of the onion, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. Scene cuts away. Now we're at the shore. We're outdoors. It is daytime. The cops are there. We see a dead body in a fishing net. Timmons and McCormick, that's the names of the two guys that Atoy killed. And Lee and O'Hara are on the scene, but they don't know why they've been called outside of Chinatown to look over a couple of bodies in a net. The chief is there, though, and he's feeling a little spicy, I might add, in this scene. But he explains things to them in plain language, doesn't he?
And it comes back to another sword because swords are apparently the preferred weapon of the Chinese gangsters there. So that's why they've been called over to the scene. And this also, I thought, we see again the usual pattern of Lee being the detective and O'Hara just sort of being disgruntled to be involved in the situation. And
Right.
this had another good line. It was the last line of the episode of this show of this particular episode, and where Lee is going back and forth with the chief, and he's not really feeling the love, and he goes, "I guess he doesn't like me," and then O'Hara shoots back with, "That's not true. He doesn't like you at all."
Yeah, he says he doesn't like me very much. That's
Oh,
not true. He
that's right.
doesn't
Yes.
like you at all, he says.
And then it
Um,
just kind of cuts.
the chief made it clear that the reason he called them is because it's a Chinese swordsman. And Lee says to them, we're assuming it's a Chinese swordsman. And the chief has a line before we close this episode. I wanted to throw in the chief's line. He says, in my 30 years of doing this, I've never seen anyone cut up by a swordsman that wasn't Chinese, or I've never seen a white person cut someone up with a sword. So again, they're making a lot of assumptions. The chief even admits that they're making the assumption here, strictly based on past performance. But yeah, that's where the episode ends, with Bill telling him, yeah, the chief doesn't like you at all. And we cut to the final credits. Another good episode. I found myself, Mike, having to pause this one a lot to make my notes, because just there was so much happening in the back and forth of this dialogue that it was difficult to keep up and write all at the same time without stopping the show.
Yeah, same. Because there are no throwaway episodes in this show. Every episode is huge. It matters, and it all progresses the story so perfectly. How everything moves along, and I mean, even like we were saying about a toy's new protege. You
Yeah.
know, at first you thought she was just a cleaning girl, just some timid girl. She's not.
Yeah.
She knows about swords.
Yeah, we're going to find out exactly how much she knows about swords, because nothing happens in this show by accident. You made the point. There's no throwaway episodes. There's no throwaway scenes either. Everything connects to something else. So all of what we've just discussed here is going to help further the story over the last couple of episodes of season one. And that wraps up our look at episode 8, Mike. Next week we'll be back with episode 9. The week after that, episode 10, and boom, we've made it through the first season already. Feels like we
Wow.
just started this yesterday, man.
Right? Yeah.
But I appreciate you taking out the time again to do this. I have a lot of fun. A, revisiting the show just to watch it, and then B, hanging out with you and talking about it. We hope you enjoyed watching this episode. Make sure you follow Mike and I on YouTube. Our channel is Diced Onion. Like and subscribe. We need more likes and we need more subscribers, man. And not enough people are catching on to us. Maybe when more people catch on to the show Warrior, Mike, we will gain new fans. But that's it for this week. We will see you a week from now. Bye.
Take care.